Gotta wait for YouTube to come in. All right, awesome. Hello, creatives, community, and kind folks. Welcome to RPG with DBJ. I am your host, DBJ, and you guys are the brilliant ones who make me look good. Today's a special day. It is my birthday. I've reached a big 50, so I am half a century old, and I'm here to drop what very little knowledge I have for you guys, but more importantly, to absorb information from all of you, because you guys make me look good, and I am a consummate learner. Today we're taking a slight bit of a break, and I say real slight bit of a break from our usual content on the channel, where we talk about anything from like the gods or Medusas or technology or magic or something. We're gonna be very meta, and we're gonna talk about game design this whole week. And furthermore, today, it being my birthday, I also thought I would give everyone else a gift, although it might be less of a gift and it might be more punishment. The first look at an RPG I have been of course, designing privately, although I've been dropping hints here and there on the Discord and the guys that have been here for quite a while. Today's it's funny because the name of it is actually my initials. It's going to be under a foundational system called Design, Build, and Juxtapose. Design, Build, Juxtapose, DBJ, of course. And the idea of this game is going to be called Retcon, all caps. Please go ahead and hashtag retcon everything, retcon the RPG. So at the end of this show, or end of each show, we're going to get further into what it's about, and think source code, think Tenet, think many time travel IP with espionage agency, more or less, in today's system. Yeah, today's setting. I'm sorry, modern day setting, where the PCs are defending modern day from incursions from time and such. And all the PCs, of course, represent agents. They are dox agents, paradox agents, and caught up are victims of actually paradox. And so that's where they kind of get their capabilities from, that they really don't belong in our time, but they have anchors that keep them. Every agent has a reason to be here and to fight the good fight, more personally because they have anchor missing. Okay, let's get rid of that. Now, very extremely generally, when we're going to talk about game design, there's something underneath the title of game design I've coined art and arithmetic. And the reason why I say that is because many of us in the game design community are absolutely brilliant when it comes to probabilities and Rickard says, see, I'm not feeling today's video. Can't we just retcon it? Yeah. Listen, the whole idea behind retcon is that the player characters' base abilities will be able to do things like retcon what just happened, fast forward, flashback, repeat, stopwatch. Like, it's going to be all of those things, extremely meta things with literally within the game, that allow them to operate, including the idea of why are PCs not available to play in the game. It's because they are missing in the time stream and such. Yeah, it's going to be a real thing. You can even retcon a situation that out of game we know happened, but in the game doesn't happen. And things like fate points, moxie points, hero points, inspiration, whatever you want to call it, will literally it's really literally the PCs picking a different branching time where they succeeded rather than failed, and pick that to replace the failure they just did to succeed. Yeah, it's all wrapped up in the whole whatever. You guys don't make me go down. It's not about me. So the reason why I picked art and arithmetic is because sometimes we lose sight of the art and we fall far deeply into the arithmetic. It was more specifically, Rickard mentioned something about why do players love to roll that D20 for a skill check, even though maybe the DC is a 5, or they're only going to miss if they roll a 1 or something. And there's something visceral about it. And I think part of game design, along with so many other things, is that we tend to lose sight of the art, of the emotion, of what drives players and game masters and such to embrace a particular part of a game, even though mathematically or logistically or whatever, it's a thing that doesn't fit. It's the concept of a very, I'll say, a very beautiful model having a mole, right? It's the thing, it's the slop, it's the thing that's wrong, it's the thing that doesn't fit right, that makes it perfect. When it seems as if you removed it, it makes this smooth running machine. Your DM says all mechanics of the game should serve to increase immersion and tell the story. And sometimes that story might be kind of awkward, even or strange. So now today on Monster Monday, normally we talk about, of course, monsters, NPCs, but I think we can shape game design instead around instead of talking about adversaries and monsters, we're going to talk about what, in certain terms of game design, what do you do in the game, in your game? Like, it's great to have a setting, and I'm guilty of this very much so. I'm a very visual person, so I know that I can imagine an image, a stop motion image of what I think the player should be doing and how the game master should interact with that. But sometimes some games fall short of telling players what they should be doing in the game. And it's, strangely enough, that is a artistic choice sometimes, a thematic setting choice that the mechanics may not support. And then that's when you have a bit of a dichotomy, which is why till this day, we often have that issue with Dungeons and Dragons. Yeah. Rickard says it might be great design. It might fit well into the setting, but does it feel fun? Yeah. And your LDM says feel of mechanics is really important. Spire RPG has the best feeling mechanics I've experienced in the game. So let me give you some examples about. This is one of the things that has been to this day corrected, but in the past, game designers didn't understand why it didn't work. And the idea is the hacker, the pilot. Those are the two basic ones: hackers, pilots. In Shadowrun, there were riggers. It's the micro game of the individual who does a thing that the other player characters are not involved in. And 99% of all science fiction games, people want to open up the book and they start asking about, oh, where are the piloting rules or starship rules? And the problem is that sometimes, crafting is another thing where it's very fun for one person, not immersive at all for anybody else. And oftentimes those rules are so divorced from the main game function that you end up playing a micro game with one individual and everybody else gets to twiddle their thumbs. Now, in recent times, they have changed that. Like, for example, hacking in Cyberpunk and Shadowrun, which used to have completely separate rules to make it feel like real hacking. And sure, real hacking is nothing like, does not fit well with a gunfight, but a skill roll to shoot someone and a skill roll to open up a door feel within the situation of the game feels right, even though it might not represent the simulation of what is going on. And oftentimes that there's a loss. Jarl DM says we use D&D for our intrigue dialogue heavy games, but really shouldn't. D&D is not good at intrigue or dialogue, but people like the feel of D&D. It's comfy, like a well-worn boot. You're absolutely right. There's some of the arguments have been, why are you using, like, example, Dungeons and Dragons when you have other games that are better at representing something? And I think the comfort of knowing how a game operates is just as important as the game itself, right? You may come up with your own version of Dungeons and Dragons with great intrigue and dialogue, and it might use a dice pool system, and that might feel a bit alien to other players. It may feel, if you don't have an initiative system or things operate simultaneously, or there are these other weird, quirky things in your game, it can be very difficult to convince people that what you're creating or what you have created is immersive, because it's just not comfortable. It's going to dinner and realizing that there's no tables, and why are there no condiments, and why does dessert come out first? It's weird. Everyone's walking backwards. What? It's I believe there's been a niche restaurant idea of everyone eating blindfolded or in the dark, and the strange feeling of eating in the dark, but they say that it allows you to um, it, embrace the flavors better. And I think sometimes when you have new rule systems for things we've played before, it feels that way. Like, what? I don't want to eat with a blindfold on. Like, that feels funny, And I think it feels the same way for other game design mechanisms. Rickard says, when it comes to the hacker and rigger, it's hard to make it work when you treat them as actual characters. It sure does. It always makes it feel like they're separate from the action, and they're like divorced from the interaction with the other players. Even if you try to make parity with like skill checks and things like that, it's a weirdism. And the same can go for uh, more simulationist spell casting and things, or crafting rules and stuff. Zax200 says, it's more than comfort, though. GURPS is a great system, theoretically, for intrigue, conversation, etc. But there's a billion different skills for talking, whereas D&D has 3. 4 if you weave performance into it. That's another thing, too, that we will talk about this week in terms of, like, common sense versus the immersive part of it, where GURPS does have a billion skills, but do you need all of them? The first edition of Eclipse Phase had a ton of like science skills, and sometimes we get into the idea that, oh well, in reality there would be 15 different science skills in my sci-fi game, and you're like, sure, but there's only 4 combat skills. The cost of buying the science outweighs the cost of the combat. How do we embrace the balance of the game without skill locking ourselves, making a skill wall? And I think some games create too much of a skill wall, where players might want to be an expert, and I'm like, I want to be an expert scientist, and the other 5 PCs are like, go ahead and try to do that. I made an expert, swordsman or gunner or something quite easily. Being an expert scientist in this game sucks. um, Crater 305, you truly the best at this, man. Oh, no. Thank you, but no thank you. I'm not the man. I'm just the man standing next to the man. Ricker says, the overarching game design is set up in a way that counters the hacker rigor. So you end up with a system that either feels way too simplistic or is a tacked-on game. Yeah. The same goes for piloting and things like that, right? It's like, great, you get to pilot, the rest of us just twiddle our thumbs. Now, I get it. Star Trek and other games, hey, Jarl DM is here. In terms of his Viking World Iscloth, there are ways to give people roles in doing a thing that further embraces them acting in that function. In the idea of Iscloth, you have a person who's like a navigator and a quartermaster, and the person who's like a scout, and someone who sets up camp and things like that. So everyone is involved in it. But in the past, we didn't do that. A lot of games don't do that. So Zax200 says, quote, I want to talk to this group of people at the bar. Is that small group conversation, public speaking, presentation, or something else? Yeah. Can I use my carousing skill? Well, it's not exactly carousing. You're like picking through like 17 different social skills. Yeah, GURPS. And I love GURPS. GURPS has some of the best written setting thematic books ever in the gaming pantheon. Oh yes. Their tech books are bar none some of the best. High tech, ultra tech, biotech. Yeah. Oh yeah. Jarl DM says, most revolutionary mechanic I've seen was in Spire. Abilities just let you do things. No role, no super specific circumstance. You can just declare things as a player. broke my design mind open. Yeah, there are some pretty revolutionary design mechanics out there. I think I would say Gumshoe is an example for me of like a smack in the head. Like, why didn't I think of it? Gumshoe, and there are various versions of it. Like, believe there's one called Bubble Gumshoe for like teenage investigators, but Gumshoe is based on like noir investigation, and in that game, you don't roll to get clues. It's a foregone conclusion. You will get the clues it takes to solve the mystery. The difficulty is navigating from one clue to the next, and will you get the next clue, which is often the case in a lot of detective shows and IP, right? No one thinks that police procedural you're watching that they won't get the clue. They're going to get the clue, but usually it's time, energy, resources, and motivation that intrudes in collecting the clue, even though everyone knows there's a foregone conclusion they're going to get it. And I think what Jarl DM is kind of thinking of, Inspire, is like it reminds me of something like that. Jarl DM goes on to say, example, my character was a revolutionary and I could just declare, one session that an NPC was sympathetic to the revolution. No specific criteria like D&D always has. Sometimes I think in game design we feel a loss of control, or feel that there's a fear in giving players the ability to automatically do something, right? Like, you automatically scale that wall. An NPC you haven't designed yet exists in the world that is your ally, and we get scared of that sometimes as a designer, like, oh, we better make them roll for it. And then in the hindsight, we regret it. We're like, oh my God, why did I make them roll for that, to get that clue or to convince that person? Of course, they're going to convince the person to let them into the city state. We want them to get in the city state, right? And because what ends up happening is, like Jarl DM mentioned about automatically making an NPC sympathetic to like the revolution, is it's not whether they can do it or not, it's when they do it, and if they do it at the appropriate moment, right? Do it too early, that NPC could get killed off or captured, or it might not be as effective. Do it too late, and they could have used that individual in the beginning, and that's where the tension gets built, not in whether they succeed or fail, but when do they do a thing, or when can they do the thing. um, um, Crater 305 says, it's like being the captain of a ship in D&D. All the fun for the captain in battles, but super lame for the rest. That's always being a pilot, navigator, ship's captain, the one who controls the mech when everyone else is riding along. Like, those things in role-playing games, when you're watching it in like, I don't know, Neon Genesis Evangelion or something, it looks cool. But when you play it, you're like, this sucks. This sucks. Ricker says, what if the hacker is strictly off-site? You have to deal with different things. Then the main party, different things with the main party, but you might need the main party to do stuff, and you can have both. It's difficult with hacking, right? The hacker is somewhere else and the PCs are there. It's very difficult unless of course, like, this is weird to say, but like, and I'm going to segue slightly, that in this retcon RPG I'm talking about, there's going to be something in it called flex time, in which it doesn't make sense that the PCs are like in a pitched battle, but another player somewhere else doing something that takes a long time. They are both going to be engaged within the plot immediately at the same time, doing the same things. So one PC might be going after, say, a serial killer, shooting at the serial killer shooting around corners and dark alleys, while another player is collecting evidence to, convict the serial killer. One action takes longer than the other, but they're both acting at the same time. And I think when you split parties, and they're like, a hacker is in their they're in a storage container locker with their CD computer and stuff, and the PCs are in a running gun battle, 2,000 miles away. There's a way to incorporate them together, but a lot of times we don't use rules to encourage that. Ricker says, you remove them from thinking about someone needs to guard the hacker and can instead focus on unique skill checks related to hacking, but might also need the need the SAM to plug in the remote deck to a PC. And that's why Cyberpunk and Shadowrun, they have the, oh, you're off site, you can't be off site, you have to be there directly. And that's the way to get around it, right? There's no reason, there is no reason to not create uh, thematic obstacles that force an action or reaction in your world. I think that's also a good idea as well. Yeah, Rickard says, I think the solution is to be offsite. That's true too, because then you don't. Although I think they want to embrace the idea that, like, the hacker's kneeling down, plugging something into a door while everyone else is having a gunfight around them, waiting for them to open up the door. And I think thematically it looks good, but I think technically it doesn't work. you know, I'll get to you just a minute, Zax. Jarl DM says, being a pilot looks like, okay, we got to get out of here fast, make a pilot check. And then they make it and fly the ship. Not exciting. Hacking is often the same. Yeah, it's very difficult to do such things, because we see it. Star Wars is a perfect example of the let's run to the starship, let's escape. We have problems, and let's navigate through the asteroid field / giant monster / battle with a bunch of people doing stuff in the background. But then you realize, well, it's just dialogue, right? And it's weird. It's like, but this should work, but it doesn't, Red Dice Diary says, I think you're right that we flex time without specific rules in games. We see in TV where someone's being chased and someone else is doing a lengthy task, yet they mysteriously finish at the same time. Yeah, I'm a... the RPG I'm working on literally embraces that idea. Like, that shouldn't make sense that someone's taking 5 hours to go to a coroner's office and get on a computer to analyze fingerprints while you're, like, punching people in the face in an alleyway, and we both finish at the same time. It's like, yeah, but yeah, it's going to be a thing. Zax says, anything that requires a multi-minute game break for rules lookup several times per session won't be my jam. Ooh, sometimes we forget about that too in game design. Like, sometimes you don't want to look up the rules, or matter of fact, it's terrible to look up the rules. I give you an example that happened in Dungeons and Dragons that didn't happen until it didn't come in until it happened in game while people were playing, and that is the summoner, pet, familiar, creature rules, right? If anyone understands that in Dungeons and Dragons there are character classes and options and spells and things that allow a player character to summon another creature, another independent living item, or even mechanical item that has its own stats. And unfortunately, you have to look up those stats. And some characters are literally built around summoning creatures that have multiple stats. It becomes a time sink. So Dungeons and Dragons design has made it so that they try to print the stats underneath the capability so you don't have to page flip. Sounds like a minor thing, but it's a problem. And too many die rolls, too many rules lookups. Zax, you're absolutely right. It can be like everyone else starts rolling their eyes. What's one of the main things that people dislike about Dungeons and Dragons? Someone playing a spellcaster who doesn't know how the spells work. And there's nothing wrong with the spells. There's nothing wrong with playing the character. It's the idea of stopping to look up the rules and such, and it can be a problem. Yeah. Zach says, if you're playing a summoner in my game, that's fine, but you're bringing your own monster manual. I'm saying that because that's how I thought you wrote. You typed it out. Hells yes. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Zach says, this happened in my campaign. Party came upon a pair of Odeogs in the city sewers. Oh, hell yeah. Cleric of Pelor rolls a religion check to see what he knows about them and gets a 1. I couldn't pass up the opportunity and told him he believes the creatures are hidden symbols of the sun and therefore holy. So he brought them back to the Grand Temple. That's awesome. Once there, he was immediately reprimanded by the high priest, but then tried to convince him of the creature's holiness and rolled a 20 on persuasion. I couldn't pass that opportunity up either. Holy shit. Literally. Yep. Oh, man. Yep. Ricker says it doesn't, talking about Red Dice talking about the flex time. Ricker says it doesn't play good, but you are right. It looks cool, but it's not game mechanically cool in terms of the hacker plugging into a door. There's a gunfight around them. They're yelling over each other's shoulders, hurry up so we can get in, or whatever the case might be. Security's around the corner. And then the person does it, and your heart's beating, and then finally the door opens and people are shooting and the door closes or whatever. And yeah, it doesn't quite work. Ricker says, yeah, piloting and hacking needs other gameplay than a straight up fighting to empower the fantasy of piloting hacking. And most time systems try to force a square peg through a round hole. Yeah. Yep. Luke training on Dagobah, Falcon flying to Bespin. Yep. It's really weird. And I want to go back because today's Monster Monday. I want to bring up something that Rickard brought up earlier. This was off camera, and I think we should talk about it today. And this is something very meta in a game that came out of 4th edition and other game systems, but Dungeons and Dragons is the biggest one. I used this extensively in a game called Feng Shui before 4th edition, but it's the idea of minions, and I want to talk about minions. And yes, I know I'm hard segueing, but I want to talk about minions and the idea of what it is about minions that seems to have been removed from gameplay, and Dungeons and Dragons, who actually literally owns the idea of it, and why people, despite the fact that it works, people don't embrace it, as well as the fact that it's really awesome to do. So for those who don't know, the minion rule is basically allows you to add in any number of adversaries that can be one-shotted. Sometimes you can just say, Dungeons & Dragons says they have 1 hit point. If you hit them, you do some damage, they're gone. In Feng Shui, they didn't even bother doing it that much. They just said, if you hit them, I believe that, well, it's a funky game system, but basically they said, if you hit them, they're down, period. And you get to describe any manner in which you take them out. And so, with the minion rule, since they each have 1 hit point, you can even do what some would consider to be damage blow through. So a character who does normally 6 points of damage, you could even extend that out and go, guess what? You killed 6 minions. Tell me how you did it. And that ruling, despite the fact it breaks the entire, it literally breaks the rules that we have in front of us for Dungeons and Dragons, right? But it fits so well to have that epic, to make players feel like badasses. And it's weird, I think, and even fearful sometimes for us designers and game masters to give players the ability to feel like a badass, to say, guess what? In this game, you trounce everything in the game. I think one of the first games I ever played, despite superhero games, where when you make up a player character, you are literally designed to be a badass, was 1990s White Wolf game, Vampire the Masquerade, and all the ones thereafter. And there are aspects of that game design that basically said, when you make your character, you're better than every mortal in the world. Almost literally, right? If they don't have special capabilities, you are a badass. And the minion rule, that really embraces the standing on the hill and fighting like hundreds of people, or the spy that gets to take out 20 soldiers in one swoop or something. And the simulationist nature of a lot of game rules don't allow us to do that. And I think what like Jarl DM brought up about Spire, like you have this ability to automatically do something. I like that. Yeah, Red Dice says, love those 1 hit point mini onions. Minions. Exactly. Ricker says, random mooks that are there to make combat feel cinematic and cool. Right. I've often mentioned this on Monster Mondays, like, guess what? You're not going to run out of monsters in your monster manual. It doesn't matter if the PCs beat their ass. Just open up the book and pick more. There's nothing wrong with that. Everyone's like, oh, they took out my demon lord. So what? Okay, they feel like a badass. You didn't fail. What happened was we didn't embrace, or we misinterpreted the way the rule systems work. And I think embracing it rather than fighting it, I think, is a good thing, no matter what. Yep. Red Dice says I might have to look at bringing them into my OSE, my old school essentials campaign. That's, you know what, for people who want to make this, I'm putting it out there for all of you, OSR, old school Renaissance, old school rules, whatever the case you want to call that, old school games where characters are very fragile. Lamentations of Flame Princess and Swords and Sorcery and all those games. If you still want your players to feel like badasses, use the minion rule, because being fragile in those games means that you just die quick. I think it works perfect for Iskloff in a major one of your shield wall battles. I think that would be awesome in Iskloff. I mean, you're going to die anyway. Let's be honest, right? All right, let's get back to the chat. Jarl says that scene from The Witcher where Geralt stomps through those thugs in the town, excellent example of how to use minions to show a character's proficiency. Yep. I blame all the dark and gritty gaming culture for killing the minion idea. Yeah, because people don't want the player to be badasses. But here's the weird thing about that: they are. Okay, we all love to talk about how gritty and realistic Game of Thrones is, right? But let's be honest. We love that Battle of the Bastards, the airing of the Battle of the Bastards, right? Now, sure, they weren't superheroes slashing through tons and tons of people, but that battle, come on. There's some Jon Snowisms in there. You're going like, there's no way he could have survived that. It's because he was a badass. He may have stumbled around a little bit, but him and all his friends and stuff, yeah, they were badasses. Why not? And I think that's a type of rule in game design that sometimes I think we allow it to fall by the wayside because we want everything to be in parity. Y'all DM says, I love the dark and gritty gaming culture. It's entirely separate to the kind of game that would have minions. I disagree. I don't think it's one or the other. I feel like it's a tool that could still be used. It could still be dark and gritty. People can die, get hurt, and all that kind of business. But being able to mow people down as well in a dark and gritty setting, I don't think it's only reserved for cinematic superheroism. I think it fits. It can fit. Let me take that back. It can fit. Red Dice Diary says, for me, it's a balancing act. Plowing through minions is cool, but also don't want the characters to feel like they're going to bounce everything unless I'm running a supers game. That, I think, is the reason why the minion rule hasn't been embraced. It's because you don't. It's like, oh, I'm going to put them up against 20 demons. Great, they trounce them all. Then all of a sudden you use a demon with the regular stat block and they can't fight it. And so I understand why they don't have it, but I'm like, oh man, that's a great tool. Zax 200 says the only thing that matters is if the master has a cool ability and the PCs kill the bad guy before you can put it on display. Going Nova is an issue in a lot of games that I feel like we had a solution to it and then we got rid of it. Is the roll initiative? Players go first. DM just folds up the character sheet and gives it to the play up their monster stat block and gives it to the players, right? Yeah, those are issues as well. Rickard says the problem I have is that the dark and gritty is influencing heroic gaming because it's becoming the default. I agree with you. Yep. That said, even heroic systems doesn't embrace it. CR is essentially there to make the game scale with the players to make sure there is that it's always on their toes. I do have an issue with scaling things for players because very early in my gaming career, I've noticed that it bothers me that when a player has a +5 and a monster has +5, and then the players get +50s when they get better, and the monsters have +50, it's the exact same thing. And to me, with my old age, being now 50 years old, it has made me feel like, well, what's the point in playing the plus 50? We might as well just keep playing the plus 5, right? And I think sometimes the 8 types of fun, I think one of the types of fun is to get bigger numbers, even though the rest of the world is getting bigger numbers with you. Y'all DM says, we use it in raids in this cloth too. Viking warriors versus unprepared peasants. Oh, hell yeah. Yeah, yeah. See, like that's what I mean. Like it depends on the context of what you're talking about, right? Like it doesn't mean that you have to make stat blocks for every single peasant, but it does mean like, you know what, in this particular situation, I think it works very much. Oh, thanks, dear sir. Wow, knocking on the door 40. Wow, okay, all right. Yeah, you'll catch up. Don't worry about it. You'll get there. Oh, Age of Decadence is a dark and gritty CRPG. Guess where you don't become an effective bad guy slayer unless you build your character entirely for combat and ignore all social survival stealth skills. That becomes an issue in game design as well. When you they call it taxing in a way. It came up with Pathfinder when it came to computer RPG. Sorry, yeah. I was like, collectible card game? No, not CCRPG. Yeah, computer RPGs can do that as well, where you're like, well, if I ignore all this other stuff, I'm better at this other thing. Red Dice says I obviously eat more XP. 140. Oh man, Rickard mentions that I feel like the current zeitgeist in gaming is that players are supposed to be normals, not heroes, which I feel has come from the make it dark and gritty mentality. And it's weird because I think sometimes we feel in the gaming community we get too caught up in the semantics and and the simulationist, right? Because while we might watch a television show or read a book or see a favorite graphic novel, and we read something or we experience something and we go, oh, Luke, let's make an example. Like Luke was a first level character who can't do anything, and must learn to get better. And you have to realize, no, Luke was never a normal character. Luke would never be accidentally popped in the head by a bad guy because he was always going to be better than everyone else, despite the story telling us that that's not the case. Right? It's the Gandalf recruiting Bilbo and Frodo, right? Like Tesla says, plot immunity, right? The show we're watching might convince us that that person is an average individual in this world, but that's not the case. Those characters are plot directed, and it's perfectly fine to have plot armor in a game if the idea in the game is to give them the armor of that plot. For example, when I used to play Feng Shui, in Feng Shui they have a rule that says unnamed characters, known as thugs and mooks and crunchies, can be killed off. They basically have 1 hit point. But if you name a person, they have full statistics, including it's the idea of the scientist that doesn't get shot, but all the high level expert black ops guys in masks and automatic weapons get mowed down by the hero, right? The scientist ducks down behind some kind of random cover and never gets shot. It's because they do have the plot armor. And it's weird to say that, but yeah, that's true. It's very true. Your DM says, for me, the normal is more like that the characters aren't chosen ones or whatever. I find it much more interesting. There's, as long as the space allows one to embrace that, absolutely. But then you get the idea of Saving Private Ryan, right? When the opening scenes of Saving Private Ryan, every single character that is not our main characters is a character who is victim to the whims of the world. I don't know how many players would enjoy, other than playing like DCC, the RPG, Dungeon Crawl Classics, to put 37 PCs that I just rolled up through a funnel and watched them all die in the very first round because of a hidden sniper shot that they didn't have any way to avoid. Right? It's the reason why in role playing games we don't attack characters when they're going to the bathroom or they're asleep. There is plot armor, even plot armor we don't think about. It's because when the characters are awake and functioning, we want them to be part of the story. That sounds like a strangeism, but it's true. We don't kill characters off while they're sleeping. We don't just automatically say your character dies off screen because they're the main characters, and that is a bit of yeah. As Mofa says, uh, as Mofa says, first game of 5e D&D, my cleric was taken out instantly. Yeah, but that's not very fun. Zax200 says no one would care about Star Wars if the grappling hook snapped while Luke and Leia were using it to get across that drawbridge on the Death Star. Yeah, oops. What's the big thing out? I love movies, but what's the big complaint? Oh man, they're making a second movie. I didn't want anybody to tell me the hero was going to live, and I'm like, did you think Spider-Man was going to die in the next Spider-Man movie? That's not going to happen. Like, really? You thought that? You thought Black Panther was going to die in his own movie, and they're going to make a Black Panther 2. Yeah, right. There is a reason plot armor exists, and sometimes death isn't the only mechanic. Sometimes loss over death is probably a better mechanic if you want to run a game where the players are not victim to the whims of the world, right? That's sometimes you have to put band-aids on a thing. 5th edition put a lot of band-aids on character survivability, whereas I think it would have been better had they just embraced the idea that the players aren't supposed to die and just made plot armor functions, mechanics, rather than like, oh, you've got extra hit points and you can heal better, and you get extra death saves. That's why PCs get death saves and creatures don't. Red Dice. Mofa said last campaign I did a mix of on rails and sandbox. Worked well, especially because the players had no idea how to deal with the sandbox and wanted direction from me. Yep, game design, sandboxing versus railroading is an issue as well that sometimes doesn't describe itself very well in terms of the game design arena. Yeah. Y'all, Red Dice says, yeah, I've been there in OSR games where someone gets taken out. Yep. In the second session of our new Game of Thrones campaign, 3 of the PCs died. Hashtag no mercy. Exactly. Oh, man. Oh, Mike, cool. What's going on there, man? Anyway, Jarl DM says, key difference for me is that movies, TV shows, etc. are written and carefully crafted. Games should be living, breathing, unexpected things. Yeah, and some games, I hate to tell you this, but Dungeons & Dragons doesn't do a great job of describing the zero to hero function. And so when new players come into Dungeons & Dragons, they're thinking of the hero, right? They're thinking of the badass. I'm 8th level. They're thinking 8th level characters, and they're like, nah, no, you're not. And I don't believe they embrace what zero to hero means. And that is how you are supposed to function in the world. So even with the elevator pitch, even if the rules don't describe it, the elevator pitch should very much show both sides of that coin, because on every single Dungeons & Dragons game, on the very front cover, there are player characters fighting the biggest badasses in the world, not the zeros going like, we need to run. Oh, man. Yeah, I hear you, Zach. I would love a movie to do that. Kill the hero off in the middle of it. Like, what? What happened? Oh, man. Mike Gould says, I literally have an encounter where I attack the players during a bathroom break and out of the box encounter his friend in need. Yeah, yes, there is an encounter in there. Yeah, we sure don't like to attack the players when their pants are down, right? But yeah. Red Dice says, I generally run games where the PC start half a step above the common man. If they persevere, are lucky, and clever, then one day they'll rise far above them. But they don't start that way. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Mm-mm-mm. George R. R. Martin writes with Discovery. Rickard says, you say that, but books can be written in Discovery mode. Not even the author knows 100% what will happen until the final draft is done. Yeah, the Discovery mode instead of outline mode, where you start writing the characters and you're not sure if they're going to live or die. But but you have to agree, George R. R. Martin doesn't quite hold the majority of his characters at high esteem. If he thinks they should die at a certain point, he kills them off. And so there is that. Yeah, man. Yeah, Jarl. Here's the argument. Jarl Dean says you're not the author of a campaign; you're the facilitator or the arbiter. And your Rika says yes, but gaming is not after the fact; it's during the writing. Yeah, it's first drafting. That's what happens when we game. It's like first drafting. Yeah. And Jarl says, I think maybe we disagree fundamentally that the GM is a writer or author. Um, I I think there's something in the middle. Let me give an example, right? You guys, all of you are probably well familiar with A Fistful of Dice, Matt Click. And if you've ever seen the beginning of any of his games or the beginning of a session, he will set up a narrow parameter of behavior and then allow the players to engage in it. I think your LDM is similar. And let me give you an example of railroading and writing, me being a DM as a writer, yet allowing the players agency. So if I start a game out by saying, all of you have been on the road for weeks on end, your rations are running low, there's very little game, you've been scrounging around for nuts and berries and roots, and none of it is nutritional at all. And you're just bone tired because you know in 3 days hence you will join up with the war party to commence the battle, and you are only half the strength you've given. If I tell you that and then say you're all sitting around the campfire, tell me what you're doing or how you're feeling, I am, as the DM, have established a mood and feeling that all the players are now in, right? I didn't give you a choice, right? I've railroaded you into that, or rather, I've quantum ogred you into it, rather, right? I've given you the situation, and now, as a player who embraces that, now you're like, okay, so I'm tired. I haven't had much food. There's going to be a battle. What do I say? What do I do? How does my character react to such a thing? And so now I'm now, once I, as the game master, I stole all the agency in that moment. Now all of a sudden I open up the book, and now as the writer of the story, I'm allowing the players to enact or react or whatever in any manner in which they want. A player can go, war, I can't wait. Another player can go, I don't want to admit my weakness to the other people around me because I'm afraid that they might, cast me aside, or someone else might say, I'm scared and I want my mommy. I'm writing a letter back home, right? That kind of thing. And I think it's weird, but we accept that. But for me to put it in the words of taking the agency away from the players and railroading them to shape a dynamic that they fit into, we accept that. But when we put it into certain specific terms, I think sometimes we fall against it. Mike Gould says a hot start is typically more railroad than sandbox, but where it goes from there, it's more sandbox. Exactly. Jarl DM says I write setup and problems, but not the outcome that I think is best or most interesting. That's for the players to decide through the game. Exactly. Setting up problems, and I think it's okay to create a narrow parameter and then let the players navigate their way out of that parameter. If you tell a player that they're on a storm-tossed ship, they didn't have a choice about the matter, but they do have a choice after the fact. Oh, we're on a storm-tossed ship. What do we do now? Rickard says nothing wrong with the DM having a plot outline of the campaign they want to run. How the players walks through the campaign isn't written down, but you might still have an idea of start and end. An example would be your 3 sessions through a game, and you decide that we've had a lot of battles. I think there should be space for the players to role play, and you decide, oh, you left the undead town 3 days ago, and now you're on the main road, giving the players space to role play. It's like, as a game master, you can decide through pacing, oh, here's role playing time, here's combat time, here's social interaction time, that kind of thing. Michael says, the ground shakes below your feet and stones fall from the surrounding buildings. The hill giant closes in and you're out of extra halflings. What do? What? I thought I had extra halfling in my pocket. No, you don't. Damn it. Oh, man, I love it. I love it. Pocket halflings. Oh, man. Ricker says, yeah, you got me. I totally say that. Ricker says, and I make a big distinction between multilinear gaming and sandbox. Yeah. Multilinear. It's a good, that's better than, I like that. Better than railroad. I might steal that. Well, not, how can I steal something when you're already here? Red Dice Diary says, I generally populate major encounters on a map, set up an initial premise, then I just track how various factions are working towards their goals and have some random charts. Yep. If you know the motivation of your world, you go on. All right, so we've come to the end of the show, and I really did want to talk about this. This is a little self-promotional. You guys can pop in a little bit, or you can get out of here if you need to. But I decided to name this role-playing game Retcon because of just being influenced. I love time travel stories, but not necessarily like sliders. And after watching Tenet and having a love for source code and there's another show called Dark. Donnie Darko is another one where time travel, it's not necessarily about time travel, but time manipulation. And in this role-playing game, Retcon, I thought it would embrace this design, build, juxtapose idea. And one of the things I brought up to off camera was a lot of role-playing games do not equally embrace the mechanical parts of combat and social interaction and intellectual investigation and personality. So I wanted to have statistics in the game, like strength, dex, constitution, and whatnot, but I wanted to make them more loose so that they embrace, a statistic. Like, for example, in the game, and I haven't put it in concrete, but I think I've narrowed it down to 5 stats. So you may have stats, for example, like blood, fire, steel, light, shadow, and those stats are going to be your physical stats. They're also going to be your mental stats, and they're also going to be your social interaction stats, and they also represent your personality. Like a high fire statistic means you're destructive and you want to burn the world to the ground. Whereas in combat, you're probably very fast and quick and brutal and things like that. Yeah, as Mofa says, after stopping someone with a time machine, I gave a player a chance to change one moment in time of their choosing. In this game, I'm going to allow players to basically retcon situations. They're going to be able to go back in time, or stop time, or pause things, or fast forward through certain situations, or flash back to a thing that should have happened but didn't, but they wanted to have happen, and allow them. The game is going to embrace the idea of manipulating the world in which a thing could happen. For example, a player character might not have a pistol, and then they go, hey, I'd like to go back in time, give myself a pistol, or at least hide it somewhere, tell myself where the gun is at, and then go get that gun to now have it at this very moment. And the answer is going to be yes, you will be able to do those things. And to the complication of having different timelines and integrating different timelines and being able to jump back and forth with them will be in the hands of the players, so that the more complicated the game gets will be in the hands of the players. Some players might not want to make it very complicated. They just want to kill things and stop crime or whatever. And then others might want to do the flashbacking, flash forwarding, that kind of thing. So yeah. Now, y'all DM, yep, Blades in the Dark has a flashback system. And Michael says, does this game include a butterfly effect? The answer to all of those is yes. It does have a flashback system. The butterfly effect idea will be in the hands of the players. So if they go back to change something, that they wanted to have had changed in the future, it will be based on their die rolls. The game system, one of the things I see in games, oh, sorry, Jarl DM says, in the system I'm working on, we now have Spirit, Steel, Secrets, and Silver as the 4 stats. Ooh, great minds think alike. Great minds, right? Because steel in my game physically means weapons. Mentally means your ability to operate machinery like technology. Socially means you can steel yourself against being manipulated by other people, and psychologically means that you are your mindset is very strong. So one other thing that I think happens in various games, and a lot of games of indie games do this, is not having dead rolls. And what I mean by that is in Dungeons and Dragons, you can very well take the dice, roll it, and go, darn, I missed. All right, I guess I'm going to have to wait. Or I rolled, I hit. Let me grab the damage. I rolled exactly ones on all my dice. I didn't do much. In this game, there's going to be it's a D8 system. One, I've explained this to Rickard. 1 means that good is good. 8 is bad. A 1 means that you are on one timeline. They haven't fractured into multiple timelines. So you want a 1 because there is you want the timelines to be aligned with what you want and what will happen, so that fate and fortune are aligned. You don't want to roll an 8 because 8 is infinity. 8 is the infinity symbol where there's so many divergent timelines that there's failure in all of them. And so Michael says, is there a +1, -1 effect on stats where more steel equals less fire? I was going to go with that. Competing stats, for those who don't know, the competing stat idea is that you have 2 stats tied to, say, an equal number. Let's take 10. So let's say you have steel and fire. So if steel becomes 6, fire would become 4. And I like the idea of balanced or competing stats, where if one rises, the other one lowers, because of lasers of feelings. Yep, your LDM says lasers of feelings is an example of that. I thought about doing that, and one of the great things about that is you can have character growth and expertise without having to use another mechanism on top of it to create balance, right? Because like in Dungeons and Dragons, when you roll your stats, a low rolls on most of your stats and high rolls on all your stats means that there's already an inequality. Whereas in competing stats, it doesn't exactly work that way. But in the game, you're going to have two stats. You're going to have your main statistics, like Jarl's DM says, spirit, steel, and secrets. And then you're going to have 3 other derived stats. You pick 2 of them, you roll 2d8, and you want to equal them or below, which means that the way the game system works, the 2d8 system works, is that you either succeed twice, meaning that you succeed greatly, you succeed and fail, which means there's always progression forward and a consequence, or you double fail. There is no dead roll. And the success, I'm using the wrong term, success and failure, because the game is about time. Sometimes time just runs out for a player character to achieve the goal that they want. So other than combat, the same stats will be for, like, let's say you're giving chase to someone, and the more losses you have, or while you're having losses and successes, your losses may run out of time for you to chase someone down, or drive that fast car, or battle on the wing of a plane, or something of that nature. The bad guy gets away, and you're like, damn it, I was going to hunt them down, or something like that. So I wanted to have the mechanism is that combat isn't about whether I die or you die. It is, will there be a chance that I will succeed or the other person succeeds within a particular time factor? So, yeah, Rickard says, does that mean time equals hit points, just more tied to a narrative? Absolutely. So there's your main stats, and then there's 3 more stats, a total of 8, because it's a D8 system. So you're going to have drive and one of your other capabilities. And if your other capability and your drive, they might be 2 different numbers. And as you suffer hit point loss, as time runs out, your drive might start to decrease, but versus your other stats, meaning that as you start to make rolls, you might not be able to double succeed. You might be succeeding with some setbacks. And so, yes, time instead of hit points becomes your guiding factor, which is kind of a weird thing to think about, but I did want to incorporate that as well. Lastly, I will say, because I can't describe the whole game, there will be most, if not all, of the game is going to be player facing, so that player facing means that there's some games where the players roll all the dice. You could even do this in Dungeons and Dragons. It's actually pretty easy, really. In Dungeons and Dragons, you could just take the average damage of all creatures, and then for all the creatures' rolls, you can just say that they roll a 10, and the player characters then roll the dice to either go above or below whatever difficulty number there is. I believe Cypher System does that, where the game master says the difficulty, whatever it is, let's say it might be a 15, and you have to roll a d20 and beat that 15. So say the monster always strikes with a 15 to hit, the player characters roll the dice, and if they roll below that, they are struck. If they roll above that, the creature misses. A strange thing to think about, but not so much, because now it allows the game master to think about other things in the game without also having to worry about like initiative scores and hit points and things like that. They have enough on their table without having to juggle lots of spell abilities. And you'll see this in some indie game design where on the DM side, the monsters and NPCs are extremely simple, but all the capabilities and all the choices are on the player side, because it leaves, if you can write everything down on a 3x5 card, that's awesome for a game master. Or if you could just write like R16, L5, T4, I'm picking that randomly for your NPC stats, and that's all you need to do is like number letter combinations. That's very simple. Then that's awesome for the game master side. One of the issues I had with, say, Pathfinder, despite how great it was designed, is making monsters with like character class abilities, and it got really complicated. And the design mechanism is like, oh, well, it's very easy. We'll just transplant this over to the game master side. But then when they did that, it's like, oof, oh my God, can we do this? Jarl DM says Black Hack has such an elegant monster stat blocks. Yep, monster stat blocks that are like 1 line, 2 lines, 3 lines of or bullet points or something. Or I didn't think of stats to make that giant. I didn't think they would fight it. I thought they were going to get a message from that giant. Okay, here's the stats for it. I'm going to give it an 8, and it has a 2 in its other ability. Boom, done. Right? Yep, Jarl DM says it's all derived from hit dice. Then they have 1 special attack and 1 special ability. 2 lines max, so simple and easy. Yeah, that's another design element to think about. So anyway, guys, I got to get out of here. Listen, there's so much in terms of game design and the arithmetic involved in it, and then how does that feel? Is 3d6 better than rolling a d20? Mathematically, probably, but there's a reason why everyone wants to roll that d20. It's that gambler's high. It's I understand all I need is a 5 or better, but I want to see if I get that 20, and everyone else at the table is like, I want to see if they roll a 1. So it's all that all rolled together, and not fighting that feeling, but embracing it. That in your game system, there might be something in it you feel you want to hold real tight, and you might have to get rid of it because everyone's like, yeah, it's too complicated, or that doesn't feel right, or I never liked encumbrance in the first place. So anyway, guys, thank you very much. We'll talk about it. And like I said, I'm kind of reserving like the last 5 to 10 minutes for like the game design to talk about that for this game I'm coming up with, and then to do it outside. So if you guys have any ideas, or you're like, what's that about? Or I think that's a problem. That's what we're here for. So anyway, guys, thank you very much. You guys have a great one. Anyway, have a great day. Jarl DM says, enjoy your birthday, dude. Hyped to hear about more retcon and playtest it sometime. Oh, hell yeah. Hell's a lot of playtesting. Maybe not so much during this holiday season so much, but it'll come up. Yep. Thank you very much there, Mr. Large. It says, take care. Have a great birthday. Guys, have a great one. I'll see you later. Bye. I will see you tomorrow. Have a great one. Thank you very much.